15 years ago, next month, I picked up the Washington Post style section and saw this picture, big, on the front of the style section on a Saturday morning. And I stopped what I was doing, which was cooking, and I thought, what a story in that face. I want to know that. I didn't even think there's a story. I want to know that person. I looked at those eyes. I saw pain in that face. I saw wisdom. I saw gentleness. None of this was conscious. I wasn't making a list, but the face really reached out and moved me, and I wanted to know that human being, particularly when I read the article that accompanied it and the quote underneath the picture. The article that accompanied it was not uninteresting. It was about the fact that actress Cicely Tyson had used Dovey as a model for her depiction of a maverick civil rights lawyer in a TV series called Sweet Justice. And that was interesting. However, will tell you freely that I have an allergy to celebrity. And the flip side of that allergy is that I love stories of unsung heroes and people who have materially changed our world, about whom we know almost nothing. Dovey is a legend in Washington, but she's not a household name. And even in Washington, there are people who don't know about Dovey Roundtree. So that part was interesting, but what really captivated me, in addition to the picture, was the quote from Dovey under the picture, which said, quote, "There's always somebody who would be the miracle maker in your life, if you but believe." And I thought, she's a lawyer? And she talks like that? Lawyers don't generally talk in those terms. Teachers do. That's a very teachery quote. It's something a minister might say. And so I was intrigued with her improbability. Crazy. You know, you fall in love with a subject and you take a hold and you can't let go. So I decided I was going to do this. And so I set about listening and listening and listening and tape recording all our conversations. And after she moved to Charlotte, tape recording over the phone and then going to Charlotte, until I became so saturated with the cadence of her speech and her word choice and her use of metaphor. And she is a walking metaphor, just like Martin Luther King, just and I've heard actors talk about inhabiting characters whom they portray. And it must be something like that. That I think is similar to the process that I went through. And of course, it would be very easy, and people have said to me, and they're right to say, how in the world did you think that you could get inside the skin of someone from whom you are separated by 40 years in time and race? What made you think you could do it? And the answer is, because I wanted to. I wanted to do it so badly. It is a pretty deranged thing to think you can do, but I just could not walk away. The job of the writer is to decide, what is the story about really? What's it about at bottom? How does it begin? How does it end? And what goes in the middle? Just like we teach middle schoolers. That is just, it really is that simple, and that's an extremely hard thing it was hard for me to figure out, and this book had a number of false starts until I figured out what it was really about. Is it a book about a lawyer? Well, I had a great beginning, a juicy, sexy beginning of Dovey in the courtroom in 1965, and I loved it. But that cast Dovey as just a lawyer, and she's not. And there were a number of beginnings, and finally I understood from a conversation I had with my mother that this is a book about courage. Basically, that's it. It's a book about moral courage. And then the question is, where did it come from? And it came from her grandmother, and that's why the book has to begin the way that it does. The famous dissent in Plessy versus Ferguson, the beautiful, uplifting words of Justice John Marshall Harlan in that beautiful dissent that our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates differences among its citizens, that in America the humblest is the peer of the most powerful. And Dovey believed it, and she fought for it. She's still fighting for it. Dovey still has fight and passion for justice. But in the course of her career, her long career, her 5 decades at the bar, she came to realize that the law, in all of its beauty and its orderliness and its potential, is limited, and it cannot transform society ultimately in the way that she believed it should be transformed. And I thought that I would read you just a paragraph from the final chapter of the book, where Dovey talks about her vision for the future. And you know, by the way, I've talked about why did I do this? What made me want to do this? Well, what about Dovey? What makes an 82-year-old woman put up with me and stick with this in her declining years, and why? She wanted this book so badly. Once she began to trust me, she wanted this book. Okay, first of all, she wanted to say thank you to the great people who mentored her. But she wanted to speak to the next generation, which is why when I see young people embrace this book, I am so gratified.